antennas, the little black thing that comes on the back of your stereo amp, that's your AM loop antenna. So it's not a revelation to the world, but when you build a transmitting loop antenna, you're trying to build a very high Q, highly efficient unit. So all of these units, here's one I found here, even on Amazon, because Amazon picks up whatever's in the world and tries to sell it. Nonetheless, it's an easy way to find things. So here's one called the Chameleon antenna. Has a control box, a sealed control box. The coax line is going in and out. And the way it works is you've got a small loop here. This small loop is connected to your transmitter, and that drives the outer loop. And in this box is an adjustable tuning capacitor, except a high voltage version. So this particular one is a pretty wideband unit, 7 to 30 megahertz, but it's low power. And the reason it's low power is because you build up an extremely high resonance in that tuning capacitor, which I'll get to a little later. There, weather-resistant body and so on. So it's nicely designed, and I suppose for portable use that might be nice. Then there's this monster. It's a couple of $1,000s from Italy.
Yeah, I saw this ad.
Yeah.
This ad with this guy.
Right.
He's apparently Mr. Loop.
So, I mean, this is a rather impressive looking piece of hardware, and it's a couple $1,000s, and its specs are, again, another wide bandwidth, 6.6 to 30 megahertz. It's a meter in diameter, and it'll handle up to 450 watts. Well, you know, that must have a huge high Q voltage that's appearing across its tuning capacitor. MFJ makes one, and I looked at their little, and it comes with a control box, and it's auto tuning. And I looked at the circuit, and it's got a an SWR bridge, and it's feeding a little analog motor control system, and it'll drive that capacitor back and forth as long as you hold your key down and resonate this thing. And that's only like, it's under $500. There's some more info on it. I mean, your null is the axle of that loop. So if the loop is this way, that's your null, and your maximum signal strength is basically everywhere else. So the edges are is your highest field, but it doesn't change much except dips off right in the middle, which is why you would receive it as a direction finder, and you'd find your null where that Nazi transmitter was hiding in the field as the FBI went around in these 1950 movies with the loop on the roof. So
what's the frequency range of that one?
This one was 7 meter, 40 through 10. No, yeah, 40 through 10 meters. And there, 400, two versions, 10 to 30 megahertz, either 449 or 499, 150 watts. That's actually a bargain if you go to the trouble of building one. Okay, so now here is the AB1HI magnetic loop. Yes,
I'm just curious about quickly though. Could you give me pricing what the Chameleon unit that you had started off with, what that goes for? So there was the top, that was the top of the line. There was a starting point before that one.
I don't know, I thought it was like in the $400, $500 range. Now, okay, now this is mine, and this is built except for the control box out of scrap that I had lying around. So we've got the outer cable is a salvaged 3/8 of #1 power line aluminum wire that I found on the street years ago and stashed it. Now, of course, you say, well, why did I find it? Well, I'm moving, I'm downsizing, so I've got all this material lying around. And I go, well, what's my last hurrah in my house before we like split? And that's why I'm down. Most of my antennas are down except for the vertical. All the wires are down, everything's off the garage, it's nice and clean now. So I've built this little, so we have these, we have I think a piece of 3-inch PVC pipe I had lying around. The couplings I made to terminate this loop and connect to it actually are flared tube fittings for flared copper tubing. And I actually, took a hammer and a chisel, and I flared the ends of that aluminum wire so that it would mesh properly with the nuts and everything. So I can take this apart. You take off those four nuts, and this whole thing breaks down into a fairly compact unit. The 3-inch pipe is connected in well, here's my tuning unit.
Okay.
Bought the capacitor on eBay.
What'd you pay for it? And who sold it to you?
Paid $45 from some guy. The motor and this coupling, you need an insulated coupling between the shaft and your motor. So this I picked up on eBay, and then on Amazon, and I picked up the motor on Amazon, and I found a little motor controller board. So altogether, I've spent, let's say, 40 and 15 for the motor, and 15 for the coupling, and about 20 for the motor drive. So it's like $100 for that. And it's coupled together. There's the motor control board. Now, this is a nasty motor control board because this is a pulse width modulated motor control, and it throws out hash like crazy. Because as I try tuning it, I'm looking at it, all of a sudden the noise level of my signal increases greatly, and it's throwing out wideband noise into the system. And it gives me something to tune for against the window in your receiver, but this I wouldn't highly recommend. You should be using pure DC, which is what MFJ has, is a pure DC coupled motor drive. There's a little motor, $12. It's a 1 RPM motor. Now, here's how I modify. I took this pipe, this hose coupling, and I smashed the ends of those individual strands of the aluminum cable so it would mesh against the other part of the, this was a fitting for copper refrigeration tubing. Now I'm connected to the wires with I have some braided wire and some aircraft hose clamps. The transmitting loop is the inner loop. That's a short circuit loop essentially. So that's just coupled directly to the transmitter. Okay, now, seems a little slow. Let's go back. Next. All right, so there shows the tuning. There was something out there that was like sounded like a beacon or something. And so I was able to, this is with my vertical antenna, and then it's going slow because I think there's a bit of video in here. I'm not seeing it play. Okay, now this is the spectrum. Oh yeah, I'm using an SDR Uno receiver to make these spectrum measurements. What I was trying to do was key my transmitter on the vertical and see whether I could tune the loop antenna against it, but they were far too close, and it was far too much common mode noise in one room to do that. So that didn't really pan out as an experiment. But you can see from this that there is a limited, how a limited bandwidth in the loop antenna. Okay, so again, I'm trying to receive at 7255, because they're always on at e-cars during the day. I either playing around with e-cars or south cars, both of which I seem to be able to reach. I was actually getting better results talking to south cars, not on the loop antenna, but on anything. Okay, now I found there's a lot of source material out there. There's this group whose name has disappeared in the scan. But they're a prepper group, and they were recommending using these loop antennas as emergency communication. Personally, and there's a lot of information. There's places to find computations online. There's a website here, aa5tv.com/loophtml. That has more information. Doesn't take a lot of digging to find this. There's a calculator online for determining what you're building and whether it's going to be a practical antenna. So I was able to use this calculator. I made several calculations at different frequencies to see what, for the given material I had at hand, which was a circumference of like 16.5 feet and 0.375 inch diameter. I gave it several frequencies for a 100-watt transmitter to see what results I would get. So it gives you a full page of information. It says I would have a 26% efficiency, 15 kilohertz bandwidth, and a tuning capacitance of 146 puffs. So that seemed all like a reasonable combination of parameters, and so I continued to focus my attention on a 40-meter antenna. This will work on other bands. Since I computed this now for several of the bands with the same set of mechanics at different frequencies, yeah, if I had a very small capacitor of 18 picofarads, this would work great on 15 meters, or it would work on 20 meters, it would work on 40 meters, not so well on 80 meters is a lost cause, which seems to be a lost cause with a lot of antennas.
I don't think I've ever seen it.
It's a lost cause with my vertical too. So, new toy and ham radio. There was an April QST magazine. Had some other designs. This was the award-winning antenna from Australia. Okay, if you all received this, you may have seen this article. Fairly complex, a double loop antenna. He designed it to run 400 watts because that's the legal limit in Australia. What's interesting about it, he used a variable vacuum capacitor Vacuum capacitors will give you an extremely wide range, but they're expensive. They're a couple of $100, and you have to build a motor drive to control them. A lot of these, again, they're all on eBay or elsewhere, but a lot of them come from Russia, and you have to hope it gets. Reading people's comments, you have to hope it gets there in one piece. So here he has a motor drive, an insulator, and this is the vacuum capacitor. And if you notice, look, copper bus bars. I mean, this thing is expecting, it's really high Q. I mean, there's no loss. This thing is solid copper bars, and people go to the trouble of building these antennas out of copper pipe if they can afford it. So, I mean, not tubing, 2-inch, 1-inch, 2-inch diameter copper pipe. And at today's prices, they build little octagonal units to create a circle. So, the sky's the limit playing with this thing. And my particular results, I'd say, nah,
Well, I heard you.
Yeah. You heard me. Really? You really? Yeah. Okay. Well, it can work. This unit is. I'm finished with it. If somebody like to play with it, they're welcome to it.
Is that because laws won't allow it in the new condo?
No, they wouldn't allow. I wouldn't inflict this upon anyone or myself, because I don't want to be fried with a high Q.
One of the things I've read about a lot of them, the better ones do have the remote control, because if you have to go in and adjust the capacitor by hand, you could get burnt.
Yes.
Very easily get burnt.
Oh no, they all have motors. They all have remote motor drive.
Not all of them.
Well.
And if you do it by hand, you're affecting it. Your body is affecting the tuning.
Of course.
So there was a few issues with that. And that's the reason a lot of them are using the motor drive.
Okay, so I'll be moving, and this thing's coming down. And if anybody would like it this month, just let me know. If you want to make a contribution for the control box, it would be accepted. But if you just want to play with it and pass it around, it's okay by me.
I was going to write something on the whiteboard, but the whiteboard marker has...
Also, if anybody needs a whole pile of shelving materials, 10-inch wide by 4 and 8 foot